We need hungrier talent who can meet higher targets, Brian said, his tone smooth but sterile, sliding the termination papers across the polished conference table like it was just another agenda item. The company's heading in a new direction. My name's Chase McCabe, 46 years old. For 9 years, I'd served as the senior account executive at Triana Corp., right in the heart of Kansas City, Missouri. I wasn't flashy. I didn't win awards for charisma. But I did build a client portfolio that, at last count, generated nearly 40% of the company's total revenue. Not through shortcuts. Not through lucky breaks. Through 70-hour weeks, red-eye flights, last-minute meetings, and relationships I nurtured like family. I looked at Brian, nodded once, and smiled, not the forced kind, but a quiet, tired one. Thanks for the opportunity, I said. I stood, gathered my things, and walked out without drama. No final plea, no attempt to change their mind. Just quiet acceptance. Brian Ellsworth had joined Triana 6 months earlier as the new VP of Sales. He was hired by the board to invigorate the team. He wore designer suits, opened every meeting with recycled TED Talk energy, and had yet to join a single client call or spend a day on the road. 3 weeks in, he changed the commission structure, slashing my earnings by 20%, even though my pipeline was overflowing and my clients were locked in for multi-year deals. I should have seen it coming. My desk had been relocated during a so-called workspace refresh, from near the windows to a dim corner next to the copier. A small thing, maybe? My calendar invites to meetings started disappearing. Yesterday, I noticed someone accessing my desktop while I was out for lunch. They were phasing me out in silence, slowly erasing my presence. I packed 9 years of work into a single cardboard box. Family photos, a chipped coffee mug my daughter painted in 3rd grade, a few client notes I kept printed out and stored separately. Not to be sneaky. Just out of habit. Some of those contacts had been with me since before Triana. People I brought in with nothing but my word and a promise. As I walked toward the elevator, Valerie from accounting passed me in the hallway. She gave me a puzzled smile. Need help with that? Are you moving to a different office? Something like that, I said. I didn't have the heart to explain. No point turning it into a scene. The elevator doors opened, and I found myself shoulder to shoulder with Everett Stanton, our CEO. He nodded absently, scrolling through his phone, unaware or uninterested in the fact that his top earner had just been let go. I wondered how long it would take him to realize what Brian had done. What it would mean. Probably not long. I drove home in silence. No calls. No radio. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of my thoughts unraveling 9 years of loyalty, travel, and trade-offs. A strange calm settled over me, not rage, not grief. More like the clarity of someone waking up and realizing the house they thought they owned was always on someone else's land. As I pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed. It was Travis Fricks, my biggest client. The contract renewal was due next week. He texted me about dinner reservations during his upcoming trip to Kansas City. He didn't know. No one did. I set the phone on the kitchen counter and stared out the window. 9 years of trust. Of making sure no call went unanswered, no ask ignored. Brian didn't just terminate an employee. He severed the only real link between Triana and several $1 million in revenue. And he didn't even know it. When I joined Triana, it was still called Midwestern Financial Services. No glass-walled offices, no branding consultants. Just 4 floors and a lot of grit. Everett hired me himself, poached me from a rival firm where I'd hit every number but kept getting passed over for promotion. I want someone who knows this region, he'd said. Someone who understands people. Someone our clients can trust. For 7 solid years he trusted me. And he was right to. I helped rebuild the book from small-town contractors and local banks to national players. I turned 1-year deals into 5-year partnerships. I brought in Lockhart Manufacturing when they left our biggest competitor. I won over the Henderson Group after 3 failed attempts by others. I gave my weekends, my evenings, and more holidays than I can count to keep those relationships strong. Rebecca, my wife, used to joke that I was married to my accounts. "Thursday dinner with the Johnsons again?" she'd ask, already knowing the answer. My kids learned early: Dad works. Dad travels. Dad's trying to make it count. I told them it would be worth it. And I meant it. 3 promotions, 2 recessions, and 1 merger later, Triana had gone from a $4 million firm to a $30 million powerhouse. And nearly $12 million of that was tied directly to clients I'd brought in and retained. Not that anyone noticed until Brian came along, calculating numbers in spreadsheets without understanding the people behind them. The first red flag? A quarterly review that felt less like evaluation and more like an interrogation. It was during a sales meeting 3 months into Brian's tenure when the shift became unmistakable. "Your client acquisition rate has flatlined," he announced, gesturing toward a PowerPoint slide as if it were irrefutable evidence of failure. The chart showed I'd brought in 2 new accounts that quarter. I leaned forward. "Because I've been focused on deepening existing relationships," I said. "The Lockhart contract just doubled in value. They added 2 facilities to the scope." Brian shook his head, already tuning out. "The future isn't in retention, it's in new business. We need hunters, not farmers." A week later, my executive assistant Julia, who had worked beside me for 6 years, was abruptly reassigned. No explanation. The following month, my travel requests started requiring additional layers of approval. My expense reports came back with clarifying questions. No one said anything out loud, but the intent was clear. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. I started hearing things: quiet conversations near the espresso machine, glimpses of unfamiliar resumes on a printer tray. I'd catch words like aggressive, fresh blood, new direction. Word was Brian was interviewing recent MBA grads, polished, hungry, and oblivious to the nuances of our industry. He called them disruptors. I called them inexperienced. Then he hired Alicia Winters, 29, from a West Coast tech startup. Slick presentation deck. Fluent in buzzwords. No background in manufacturing or supply chain. No real experience navigating union-driven contract cycles or federal procurement protocols. But still, during her first week, she was assigned to accompany me to a call with Travis Hicks, my longest-standing client and one of our largest. No warning. No briefing. Just a line in my calendar. Alicia joining, shadowing for development. Travis noticed. Of course he did. After the call, he texted, "Who's the new girl? You training your replacement?" I sent back a laughing emoji. Just expanding the team. But on the drive home that night, something in me tightened. A heaviness in my chest. That quiet, unmistakable tug I'd learned to trust after years of reading between the lines, in boardrooms, in client meetings, in subtle shifts in tone. I should have listened to it months ago. That evening, I placed the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. The house was quiet. Rebecca was in Denver for the week, helping her sister with a new baby. Probably for the best. I needed space to process. To breathe. I pulled out my personal phone and scrolled through contacts. 9 years' worth of names. People I'd spent holidays checking in on. Clients whose kids I'd met at company picnics. Vendors who'd moved heaven and earth to meet my timelines because they trusted I'd do right by them in return. Everything official was on the disabled work phone now buried in that box. But all the real relationship equity? That lived here, on my own device. Phone numbers. Dinners. Golf games. The human part of the business. I took a sip of bourbon and let it burn. 9 years. 60-hour weeks. Trade shows. Delayed flights. Missed birthdays. Missed ball games. I gave up a lot for Triana. Built something real. Something valuable. And in the end, it wasn't mine to keep. I opened my laptop and pulled up my employment contract. Scanned the non-compete clause. 1 year, enforceable only if I left voluntarily. But I didn't leave. I was cut. The door to reclaiming my book of business wasn't closed, it had been flung wide open. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Travis. Dinner's locked in for Thursday. Looking forward to talking renewal. I stared at that message for a long time. Travis represented $1.7 million in annual business. He'd followed me from my last firm to Triana, and he wasn't the only one. Henderson Group. Westfield Properties. Carlton Industries. Together, those accounts brought in another $1.5 million. And all of them had renewal discussions scheduled in the next 30 days. All of them worked with me directly. Not Triana's name. Mine. I set the glass down and made a decision. I wouldn't make calls tonight. Wouldn't send any emails. I wasn't going to act from ego or emotion. I'd sleep on it. And in the morning, I'd make exactly 3 calls. Not to vent. Not to complain. Just to inform 3 key clients that I was no longer with Triana Corporation. That I'd be in touch soon with next steps. The rest would unfold naturally. I reached into the box and pulled out the family photos I'd stuffed between files. My daughter's graduation. My son's first Little League game. Pictures I'd barely stopped to appreciate while chasing quarterly goals. And now? Now I had time. And clarity. The photo was from our trip to Yellowstone. The one we almost canceled because a client had a so-called emergency. I'd taken the call from the hotel balcony while the kids waited inside in their hiking boots. That photo went into the same cardboard box with all the others, the weddings, the birthdays, the Little League wins I'd missed for work. I'd given up too much already. Tomorrow, that would start to change. I drained the last of my bourbon, set the glass in the sink, and went upstairs to sleep in an empty house. For the first time in nearly a decade, I didn't set an alarm. No red-eye flights to Chicago. No Monday morning pipeline reports. No meetings to prepare for by dawn. Just quiet. And clarity. Brian Ellsworth had made the kind of mistake that doesn't show up until it costs you something irreplaceable. And I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. The next morning, I made exactly 3 calls. No theatrics, no bitterness, just facts. Travis, I'm no longer with Trevant as of yesterday. Wanted you to hear it directly from me. His reply was immediate. What happened? Who's handling our account? I kept it neutral. Brian Ellsworth will likely reach out. Or Alicia Winters. Silence then. The girl from the last meeting? She doesn't know our business, Chase. I didn't respond to that. I just let the weight of it sit. James Henderson and Peter Carlton got the same call. No pitches. No promises. Just the kind of straightforward communication they'd come to expect from me over the years. By noon, my personal phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Clients talk. The industry's smaller than people think. Word had gotten out. At 2 p.m., Everett Stanton called. I watched his name light up my screen, then let it roll to voicemail. Chase, this is Everett. We need to talk about your transition. Several key clients are expressing serious concern. Please call me back immediately. I didn't. Instead, I drove into the city and met with Lawrence Finch, employment attorney, good guy, and someone whose son-in-law I'd once helped secure a loan for a bakery that's still open today. They can't stop you from working, Lawrence said after reviewing my paperwork. But they'll try to shake your clients. Prepare for the usual legal posturing. Sure enough, by 4 p.m., Trevant's legal team emailed a reminder about confidentiality obligations. At 5 p.m., Brian himself texted, suggesting we discuss my exit package. He dangled the possibility of consulting work, of course. But it was too late for all that. At 5:30 p.m., another message lit up my phone. Travis again. Just got off a call with your CEO and that VP who canned you. They promised Alicia would personally oversee our account, and offered a 10% discount on renewal. And what did you say? I asked. Told them I'd think it over, he replied. Then, after a beat, just sent our termination notice citing change in relationship management. Then he added, James and Peter did the same. Still, I didn't respond. Not out of arrogance. Just because there was nothing left to say. Travis knew what he needed. And where to go. Wherever you land, Chase, he wrote. That's where our business is going. By nightfall, 3 more clients from my portfolio had followed suit. By the next morning, 8 contracts had been terminated, more than $3. $2 million in active revenue gone from Trevant in less than 24 hours. Julia, my former assistant, texted me shortly after. Complete chaos. Brian's panicking. Trying to blame you. Everett called an emergency board meeting. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Chase McCabe? A voice asked. This is Michael Grantley. From Grantley and Company. I hear you're available. A few mutual friends speak highly of you. I sat down curious. I'm listening. He laid it out. Senior Vice President role. Executive Committee seat. 6-figure signing bonus. Total autonomy. When would you want me to start? I asked. He didn't hesitate. How's tomorrow sound? I accepted, not because I needed the job, but because it was exactly what I'd been denied: respect, freedom, and a seat at the table I'd spent years earning. Later that afternoon, another text from Brian appeared on my screen. Board approved a retention package. 6 months full salary. Stock options. Just help us transition your accounts. I stared at it, then locked my phone and slipped it into a drawer. They'd had 9 years to recognize my value. And now that it was walking out the door, they were learning, too late, what it actually meant to lose it. Scrambling to put a price on what they'd lost after the fact. Too little, far too late. A week into my new role at Grantley and Company, Julia called me from her personal number. You need to hear this, she said, her voice low. It wasn't just about Brian wanting his own people. I sat in my new office, larger, brighter, quieter than anything I'd ever had at Trevant, and listened as 9 years of company history unraveled into something far more calculated. They were planning to sell the firm. Julia explained. Veritas Capital made an offer 2 months ago, but with conditions. They wanted to replace the senior client leads, integrate the key accounts with their portfolio companies. Suddenly it all made sense. Brian hadn't been brought in to grow sales. He was a plant, a transitional executor. His job had been to sever the client relationships I'd spent nearly a decade building so they could be rebranded as assets, not loyalties tied to one man. My termination wasn't performance-related. It was a step in an acquisition checklist. How do you know all this? I asked. I still work near the executive suite, she said. I see the documents. Hear the meetings. Just yesterday, the deal fell through. Veritas pulled out. Said the client base wasn't transferable. They wanted your relationships, and now they're gone. After we hung up, I sat there, silent, the weight of it settling deep. It wasn't failure they punished. It was success. I'd made myself indispensable in a business that didn't want anyone to be. Too many client birthdays remembered. Too many late-night emails answered. Too many contracts secured through nothing more than trust and consistency. And that trust couldn't be sold off with a signature. It had to be cut out, removed, with the hope the structure would stand without its foundation. I opened my laptop. More client emails. More messages from names I recognized, CFOs, procurement heads, regional directors, reaching out to say they'd heard I'd made a move. The industry was buzzing. Chase McCabe was now with Grantley, and clients were taking notice. Meanwhile, Trevant's stock had dropped 12% in less than a week. My phone buzzed again. Everett. Can we meet? Just the two of us. No lawyers. I didn't respond right away. I stared out the window at the skyline. I wasn't just fired. I'd been made expendable by design, removed from the equation so the math would look cleaner to potential buyers. I called Travis Hendris. Quick question, I said. Did Trevant introduce you to anyone from Veritas Capital over the last few months? A long pause. Yeah. Some guy named Thomas. Said he was a strategic advisor. Showed up to our last quarterly. Asked about our goals, our challenges. That was the confirmation I needed. Trevant had been parading Veritas reps in front of my clients, planting seeds for a handoff, while I was still logging into morning pipeline calls thinking I was building something real. I spent the rest of the day making quiet phone calls. 6 of my largest clients confirmed similar visits, introductions to industry consultants, backroom transition prep under the guise of partnership. They hadn't just fired me. They'd planned my removal months in advance. Not because I couldn't do the job, but because I'd done it too well. By late afternoon, I finally texted Everett. No meeting necessary. I understand the Veritas situation completely. His response came back within minutes. It was a business decision, Chase. Nothing personal. But it was personal. 9 years of missed birthdays and family dinners. 9 years of saying yes to every red-eye flight and last-minute client dinner. 9 years of weekends sacrificed for RFPs and renewal presentations. And all of it written off as a line item to tidy up before an acquisition. I closed my laptop. Grantley had already inked contracts with 11 of my former clients, totaling nearly $5 million in annual revenue. Not because I asked them to. Because in this business, trust doesn't travel by wire transfer. It walks in with a handshake and stays with the people who earned it. Trevant thought they were replacing a title. What they lost was the foundation their growth depended on, and they still hadn't figured it out. 3 weeks after I joined Grantley, an email hit my inbox. An invitation to speak at the Midwest Financial Services Conference. Panel title: Building Relationships That Outlast the Sale. Client Loyalty in a Transactional Market. The irony wasn't lost on me. I accepted the speaking invitation, not for ego or applause, but because I knew exactly who would be in that hotel ballroom. Industry peers, decision makers, potential partners, and most importantly, what remained of Trevant's leadership team. Everett never missed this event. Neither did most of the board. They would be there, watching. Meanwhile, Grantley had given me something Trevant never did: resources, and more importantly, ownership. 2 full-time analysts. A marketing team that actually understood the accounts we serviced. And equity, real partnership. Every client I brought in wasn't just a number in a spreadsheet anymore. It was a stake in something I was helping build from the inside out. I didn't spend the month before the conference polishing flashy slides or rehearsing marketing soundbites. I spent it in strategy sessions with my analysts, crunching numbers, pulling reports, examining real-world outcomes. Every client that had followed me from Trevant to Grantley had been tracked and studied. We weren't just meeting expectations, we were exceeding them. The metrics spoke for themselves. Service response times had dropped by over 50%. Implementation costs were down nearly a third. Customer satisfaction scores had surged by double digits. It wasn't just about me. It was a case study in what happens when companies stop treating relationships like commodities and start treating them like cornerstones. On the morning of the event, I looked over my notes one final time. No theatrics. No drama. Just facts. Clean, simple, and devastatingly clear. I walked into the conference hotel's grand ballroom and immediately spotted Everett at the back of the room, huddled with 2 Trevant board members over coffee. He saw me and stiffened. I gave him a polite nod and moved on. The panel began with the usual chatter: industry disruption, market pressures, AI forecasts. When my turn came, I spoke plainly. In an industry obsessed with automation and scale, I said, we've lost sight of the most fragile, irreplaceable asset: trust. Not between companies, but between people. I talked about what had happened, not directly, not by naming names, but by walking through real transitions. I showed what happened when clients weren't treated like transactions. I showed what happened when someone actually took the time to understand their needs and follow through. Trust, I said, is not transferable. It doesn't care about titles or org charts. It attaches itself to action, and it stays with consistency. The Q&A followed. A younger analyst in the front row raised his hand. Chase, don't your recent moves from Trevant to Grantley, along with your clients, represent the very risk companies try to avoid when limiting autonomy for account executives? The air in the room stilled. I could feel Everett watching, waiting. That's a fair concern, I said. But let me offer a different perspective. Trevant didn't lose those clients because I left. They lost them because they misunderstood what the clients valued. These weren't relationships built on personality. They were built on delivery. Consistent, reliable results. And when those results became secondary to internal restructuring and new management priorities, clients made a simple, rational decision. They followed the results. I let the words settle before adding, every company has the right to pivot. But every client has the right to decide whether that pivot still meets their needs. The market doesn't care about intentions. It reacts to outcomes. And sometimes the outcome is losing what you undervalued. After the panel, 3 former Trevant clients came up to me quietly. One asked for a meeting. Another handed me a card. By the end of the day, Grantley had signed letters of intent with 5 new accounts, adding another $2.7 million in annual revenue. That evening, I checked the financial news. Trevant had announced a strategic restructuring. Brian Ellsworth was said to be pursuing other opportunities. The Veritas deal had officially collapsed. And their stock? Down another 8%. I closed my laptop and leaned back, not with triumph or vindication, but with a steady, grounded calm. It wasn't about being right. It was about proving that what I built mattered. That relationships aren't easily replaced. That loyalty, once earned, doesn't migrate to a logo or a balance sheet. It stays with the people who earned it. And no amount of buzzwords or boardroom strategy could change that. Possible by the market itself. The lesson had been delivered. Whether anyone at Trevant would actually learn from it was no longer my burden to carry. 6 months after my termination, I stood at the front of Grantley's largest conference room, surrounded by a team I had helped build and a leadership group that actually listened. Behind me, a single slide lit up the screen, our quarterly numbers. $8. $4 million in new business, with 70% coming directly from clients who had once sat in Trevant's portfolio. Michael Grantley raised a glass with a smile. The best acquisition we've ever made, and we didn't even have to buy a company to get it. A wave of polite laughter swept through the room. I smiled, but I didn't laugh. This moment wasn't about applause. It was about proof. Quiet, irrefutable proof that value doesn't disappear when someone is pushed out. It simply finds a new place to thrive. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A news alert. Trevant Corp announces CEO transition. Everett Stanton steps down amid continued revenue challenges. I slipped the phone away without showing anyone. Some wins don't require a victory lap. Sometimes just being on the other side is enough. Later that day, an email came in from Alicia Winters, the young hire Brian had once tried to position as my replacement. I've been let go, she wrote. Most of the sales team has. Is Grantley hiring? I forwarded it to HR with a short note, worth interviewing. Not her fault what happened. As I was leaving the office, my assistant handed me an envelope from a courier. Inside was a handwritten note. It was from Everett. You were right. I put transaction above relationship. Cost the company everything. If you're ever open to coffee, I'd welcome the chance to apologize face to face. I folded the note and slid it into my jacket pocket. Maybe one day. Not today. That evening, I drove past Trevant's old headquarters. The sign was halfway removed, letters dangling from cranes. According to the local business journal, they were relocating to a smaller space outside the city. I didn't stop. Didn't take a photo. Just kept driving, eyes forward, toward the life I'd started building from the ground up. 1 year to the day after Brian had slid those termination papers across the table, I signed the final documents making me a full equity partner at Grantley and Company. Since my arrival, the firm had grown by 34%. My portfolio now represented nearly $20 million in annual revenue. I closed the manila folder containing the agreement and turned to look out the window at the Kansas City skyline. Same buildings, same streets, but from where I sat now, everything looked different. Rebecca came in with 2 cups of coffee. Signed and official? I nodded. Signed and official. She sat across from me, studying my face. You don't look as happy as I expected. I exhaled. Just thinking. About what we're building here. About how to do it right this time. That morning, I'd approved the hiring of 3 new account managers. Each of them would get the same profit-sharing structure I had negotiated for myself. No one on my team would ever build something here just to have it stripped away. That was my first decision as partner, and the most important one. My phone buzzed again. It was Travis Hrizard, my longtime client. Heard about the partnership. Congratulations. Knew you'd land on your feet. Thanks to clients like you, I replied. But he corrected me. No. Thanks to you being who you are. We just followed the value. After we hung up, I glanced at the framed quote on my shelf. Rebecca's Christmas gift from the year before. The best revenge is massive success. I turned it face down. That chapter had already ended. I opened my calendar and scheduled lunch with Everett. Not to gloat. Not to relive what had already passed. But because sometimes the final step in moving forward is letting go of what came before. I shut down my computer, grabbed my keys, and headed out to meet Rebecca. We had tickets to our son's band concert. Something I wouldn't have made time for in my old life. Some endings don't feel like losses. Some fires are necessary to clear the path. And today, more than ever, I understood what it meant to start over, on purpose.